Katie Morgan stood in the landing bay of the Galactic Coalition Military Academy and tried not to look as nervous as she felt. The ship that brought her from Earth had just departed, its engines creating a blue shimmer against the purple sky of Sentinel-7. Around her, dozens of alien cadets moved with purpose and confidence. Some had scales that reflected the light like mirrors. Others had too many limbs or eyes in places that made her stomach turn. A few floated instead of walked. Katie adjusted the strap of her standard-issue bag and wondered if coming here had been a terrible mistake. The Academy complex stretched before her like a small city made of silver and glass. Buildings rose in spirals and curves that human architecture never attempted. In the distance, she could hear weapons fire from the training ranges and the sharp commands of instructors in languages she didn't recognize. The air smelled different here, metallic and sharp, with a hint of something sweet that might have been the native plants growing between the pathways. A human woman approached her with a smile. Her name tag read Allen, and she wore the insignia of a senior cadet. "You must be Morgan. I'm Lisa Allen, second year. I'll show you to your quarters and give you the basic tour. Fair warning, it's going to be rough. Humans don't have the easiest time here." Katie followed Lisa through the main gate. "I read about the academy. I know what I'm getting into." Lisa laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Reading about it and living it are different things. "See those cadets over there? The tall ones with the blue skin? They're from Frost. Their homeworld has 3 times Earth's gravity. They can carry equipment that would break our spines. Those red ones with the fins? They breathe underwater and on land. They can operate in environments that would drown us in seconds. They passed a training yard where a group of insect-like aliens were assembling weapons with their multiple arms at impossible speed." Katie watched them complete in 30 seconds what would take her 5 minutes. Her confidence, already shaky, dropped another notch. "Why are you telling me this?" Katie asked. "Because I wish someone had been honest with me on my first day," Lisa said. "Humans are new to the Coalition. We've only been members for 10 years. Most species here have been part of this alliance for centuries. They have biological advantages we can't match. We're smaller, weaker, slower. Our senses are limited. We can't survive extreme temperatures or toxic atmospheres without suits. In a lot of ways, we're the weakest species at this academy." Katie felt anger flare in her chest. "Then why did they accept us?" "Because we keep applying. And the Coalition doesn't discriminate based on biology. But that doesn't mean it's fair. It just means we have to work 10 times harder for half the recognition." Lisa stopped in front of a dormitory building. "Your room is on the 3rd floor. You'll have 2 roommates, both human. Danny Wright from New York and Sam Cooper from Texas. Orientation is at 600 tomorrow. Don't be late. Instructor Vex doesn't tolerate tardiness, and he especially doesn't tolerate it from humans." The next morning arrived too quickly. Katie barely slept, her mind racing with worry and her body uncomfortable in the strange gravity of Sentinel-7. It was close to Earth normal, but just different enough to make her feel slightly off balance. She dressed in her new cadet uniform, which fit poorly because it was designed for a dozen different body types, and made her way to the orientation hall with Danny and Sam. The hall was enormous, with a ceiling that disappeared into darkness above them. Hundreds of cadets filled the space, divided into species groups. The humans numbered only 15 out of nearly 400 cadets. They clustered together, looking small and vulnerable among the aliens. Instructor Vex entered, and the room fell silent. He was massive, easily 8 feet tall, with dark green scales and yellow eyes that seemed to look through flesh and bone. His species, the Sauran, were known as some of the finest warriors in the galaxy. He moved with a predator's grace despite his size. "Welcome to the Galactic Coalition Military Academy," Vex said, his voice deep and resonant. "You are here because your governments believe you have potential. Over the next 4 years, we will determine if they were correct. Most of you will fail. Some of you will quit. A few will excel. Your biology does not determine your fate, but it will determine your challenges." His yellow eyes swept across the assembled cadets and stopped on the human group. "Humans, your species is ambitious. You reached for the stars before you were ready. You joined the Coalition when you barely understood what it meant. You are fragile, short-lived, and lack the natural weapons or defenses of virtually every other species here. You will suffer more than others. You will struggle more than others. This is not bias. This is biology." Katie felt her hands clench into fists. Around her, the other human cadets shifted uncomfortably. Vex wasn't being cruel, just factual, which somehow made it worse. The first week was brutal. Physical training revealed every limitation of the human body. While other species ran for hours without tiring, humans gasped for breath after 30 minutes. While others lifted massive weights with ease, humans struggled with basic equipment. The frost cadets trained in chambers that would give humans hypothermia. The desert species trained in heat that would cause heat stroke. But the worst part came during weapons training. The standard-issue plasma rifle was a beautiful piece of technology, capable of firing superheated energy bolts that could punch through armor. It ran on power cells, small cylindrical batteries that fit into the weapon's grip. Each cell provided approximately 40 shots at full power. Katie learned quickly that 40 shots wasn't enough. During combat drills, firefights could last for minutes or even hours. Aliens with electrical organs could recharge cells using their own bodies. Others had such efficient metabolisms they barely tired and could carry dozens of spare cells without feeling the weight. Humans had to carry extra cells in heavy packs, and even then, they ran out faster than anyone else. During her third week, Katie's squad was running a simulation exercise in the combat arena. The scenario was simple. Defend a position against waves of automated drones for 20 minutes. Her squad consisted of herself, 2 frost warriors, a Scial energy being, and another human named Greg Patterson. The drones came in fast and numerous. Katie fired in controlled bursts, trying to conserve ammunition. The frost warriors beside her fired continuously, their massive frames allowing them to carry triple the normal power cell load. The Scial simply absorbed energy from hits and redirected it back at enemies. 15 minutes in, Katie's rifle beeped a warning. Low power. She ejected the spent cell and slapped in a fresh one. Her last one. 5 minutes left and only 40 shots remaining. She made every shot count, dropping drones with precise fire. But there were too many. With 2 minutes remaining, her rifle died completely. The power cell was empty. Weapon down, she shouted, pulling her backup pistol. It had maybe 10 shots left. The drones swarmed their position. Greg went down, his weapons also empty. The frost warriors were still firing, barely noticing the human's predicament. Katie fired her last pistol shots and then could only watch as the simulation ended in failure. Instructor Vex appeared on the catwalk above them. Cease fire. Simulation complete. Failure. He pointed at Katie and Greg. Humans, you depleted your ammunition reserves with 27% of the exercise remaining. Your squad failed because you lacked endurance. We carried maximum loadout, sir, Katie said, trying to keep her voice steady. We used controlled bursts and proper fire discipline. Irrelevant, Vex said. You need power cells. More cells than your bodies can carry. More cells than combat situations allow you to reload. Your species requires constant resupply, making you a logistical liability. Until you solve this problem, humans will remain support personnel, not frontline combatants. The words stung because they were true. That night, Katie sat in the Academy library scrolling through technical documents on various species' biological advantages. The Scial had conductive fluid instead of blood, allowing them to power devices directly. The Sparkkin generated electricity in specialized organs. The Threen had photosynthetic skin that slowly recharged their energy reserves. Danny found her there at midnight. You look like you're trying to solve the universe's problems. Just one problem, Katie said. How do we compete when we're biologically outmatched in every category? Danny sat down across from her. He was studying combat medicine, one of the few fields where humans actually excelled because of their experience with their own fragile biology. You're looking at this wrong. We're not outmatched in every category. We adapt better than anyone. We use tools better. We think creatively. Creative thinking doesn't reload my rifle. No, but maybe it finds a different solution. Danny pulled up a document on his tablet. I've been studying comparative biology. Did you know human blood carries electrical impulses? Our entire nervous system runs on bioelectricity. It's weak compared to species like the Sparkkin, but it's there. Katie looked at the diagrams. How weak? Millivolts across cell membranes. Tiny amounts. But in theory, if you could tap into it, amplify it, regulate it. Danny trailed off. I'm just thinking out loud. It would be incredibly dangerous. But Katie wasn't listening to the danger warning. She was thinking about. Building the device became Katie's obsession. Every spare moment between classes and training exercises was spent in the engineering labs or the library. Danny joined her whenever his medical studies allowed. They worked in careful secrecy, using legitimate research projects as cover for their real work. The first challenge was understanding exactly how much power a plasma rifle needed. Katie borrowed diagnostic equipment and ran tests on standard power cells. Each cell stored approximately 500 kilojoules of energy. During firing, the rifle drew power in sharp bursts, each shot consuming about 12 kilojoules. That meant 42 shots per cell, though the actual number varied based on environmental factors and power settings. Danny researched the human body's energy production. An average adult generates about 100 watts of power just sitting still. That's from metabolism, heat production, the electrical signals in our nervous system. When active, that can triple. But most of it's heat. The actual electrical energy is tiny. How tiny? Katie asked. Measured in milliwatts. A power cell stores millions of times more energy than the human body generates electrically in a day. Katie felt her excitement deflate. So it's impossible. I didn't say that. Danny pulled up more data. The electrical signals are tiny, but the chemical energy is substantial. Your body processes about 2,000 calories a day. That's about 8,000 kilojoules of energy. The problem is accessing it. A power cell holds 500 kilojoules. My body processes 8,000. That's 16 power cells worth of energy every day. In theory, Danny said, but you need that energy for basic functions. Walking, breathing, thinking. You can't just drain it all for a weapon. They spent days working through the mathematics. The human body stored energy in glucose, fat, and glycogen. During intense activity, it could mobilize this energy quickly. An athlete in peak exertion could briefly produce over 1,000 watts of power. The question was whether they could tap into that power without killing the person in the process. Katie began designing the interface device. It needed to be small enough to be portable, but robust enough to handle the power conversion. She settled on a cylinder about the size of a marker pen, with a medical needle at one end and a standard power cell port at the other. Inside would be the critical components: a glucose sensor, a voltage regulator, a power converter, and a dozen safety systems. The theory was simple. The device would insert into a major vein, likely in the forearm. It would read the glucose content in the blood and use a catalytic process to convert that chemical energy into electrical energy. The voltage regulator would step the power up from millivolts to the levels needed for a power cell interface. The safety systems would prevent power drain that might damage the body or cause metabolic crisis. Simple in theory, potentially fatal in practice. Danny obtained the medical components through his studies. Needles designed for long-term IV placement, glucose sensors used in diabetic monitoring, biocompatible materials that wouldn't trigger immune responses. Each piece was legitimate medical equipment, but their combination was entirely unauthorized. Katie fabricated the technical components in the engineering lab. She told her instructor she was working on a project to improve power cell efficiency. Technically true, just not the whole truth. The voltage regulators and power converters were delicate work, requiring precision that pushed her skills to the limit. 6 weeks after starting the project, they had a prototype. It looked crude, wrapped in medical tape and zip-tied together, but the components were sound. Danny held it up to the light in their quarters, examining it with a critical eye. "We need to test it," he said, "but not on a person. Not yet." They started with simple biological systems. Lab-grown tissue samples that Danny acquired through his medical program. The device could interface with the tissue and extract trace amounts of energy. Not much, but enough to prove the concept worked. They refined the design, improving the extraction efficiency and adding more safety features. 3 months into the project, they had a device that could theoretically work on a living human. Danny ran simulation after simulation on his medical equipment. The projections were encouraging but terrifying. The device could potentially power a plasma rifle for up to an hour of sustained combat. But it would drain the user's glucose levels dangerously low. It would stress the cardiovascular system. It would hurt. "We need a test subject," Katie said one night. Danny looked at her. "No. We've done everything we can with simulations and tissue samples. We need real-world data. Katie, this could kill someone. If the voltage regulation fails, it could stop their heart. If we drain too much glucose, they could go into hypoglycemic shock. If there's an infection, it'll be me," Katie interrupted. "I designed it. I'll test it." "Absolutely not. Danny, I'm doing this with or without your help." "I'd prefer with," they argued for an hour. Danny tried every medical argument he knew. He showed her statistics on experimental device failures. He explained in detail every horrible thing that could go wrong. Katie listened to all of it and then repeated, "I'm doing this." Finally, Danny slumped in defeat. "Fine, but we do this properly. Medical monitoring. Emergency equipment standing by. I'll need drugs on hand in case of cardiac arrest or metabolic shock. And if anything goes wrong, anything at all, we stop immediately and get you to the medical wing." They planned the test for a Saturday night when most cadets were off duty and the labs were empty. Katie prepared by eating a large meal, loading her system with glucose. Danny assembled medical monitoring equipment in one of the engineering lab's back rooms. Heart rate monitor, blood pressure cuff, glucose meter, and a portable defibrillator he had smuggled out of the medical wing. Katie sat on a stool, rolling up her left sleeve. Her heart was pounding and her hands were shaking. Danny sterilized the device and prepared the injection site on her forearm, right over the median cubital vein. "Last chance to back out," Danny said. "Do it," Katie said. The needle went in smoothly. Danny was skilled at IV placement and Katie barely felt it. He secured the device with medical tape and activated it. For a moment nothing happened. Then Katie felt a strange sensation in her arm, like cold water running through her veins. "Status?" Danny asked, watching the monitors. "Feels weird, cold, not painful." Danny checked the readings. Heart rate elevated but stable. Blood pressure normal. Glucose reading is steady at 90 milligrams per deciliter. He looked at the device's display. "It's working. Very low power output, but it's definitely extracting energy from your bloodstream." Katie felt a surge of triumph. It worked. They had done it. Then the pain started. It began as a dull ache in her forearm and spread rapidly. Within seconds, it felt like her entire arm was cramping. The cold sensation intensified, becoming a burning cold that made her gasp. Danny saw her expression change and immediately moved to remove the device. "Wait," Katie said through gritted teeth. "Give it a minute." "Katie, you're in pain." "I said wait." The pain plateaued at a level Katie could barely tolerate. It felt like a bad muscle cramp combined with the sensation of ice water in her veins. But it was manageable. She focused on breathing, on staying still, on letting her body adjust to the foreign object drawing power from her blood. After 2 minutes, Danny checked the readings again. Glucose dropping, down to 85. Heart rate still elevated. Power output steady at 0.05 watts. "How much power does a rifle need?" Katie asked. "About 30 watts during active firing." Katie felt her hope sink. 0.05 watts isn't enough, not even close. And we're already seeing physiological stress. "Katie, we need to stop." She nodded reluctantly. Danny deactivated the device and carefully removed it. The pain faded quickly once it was out, leaving only a dull ache and a small puncture wound he covered with a bandage. "So it doesn't work," Katie said quietly. "It works," Danny corrected. "It just doesn't work well enough." "Not yet." Over the next month, they refined the design. The problem was extraction efficiency. The device could only access a tiny fraction of the energy in Katie's bloodstream. They needed to increase that fraction without increasing the danger. Danny had an idea. "What if we're thinking about this wrong? We're trying to extract energy passively, like sipping through a straw. What if we stimulated the body to produce more energy, more actively? How? Adrenaline, exercise, stress hormones. When your body thinks it's in danger, it floods the system with glucose and ramps up energy production. If we could trigger that response artificially, they added new components to the device. Chemical sensors that could detect adrenaline and cortisol. Systems that could provide small electrical stimulations to trigger hormonal responses. It was delicate work, balancing on the edge of what was medically safe. The second test came 5 weeks after the first. Katie prepared the same way, but this time she did jumping jacks before sitting down, getting her heart rate up and her adrenaline flowing. Danny inserted the upgraded device and they activated it. The pain was worse this time, sharp and intense, but the readings were better. Power output climbed to 0.5 watt, then a full watt. Katie's glucose levels dropped faster, but they had anticipated that. Danny had. Final evaluations began on a cold morning with clouds hanging low over the academy. Katie stood with her squad in the staging area, checking her equipment for the third time. Standard plasma rifle, 4 power cells in her vest, 2 in her pack. Backup pistol, medical kit, combat knife. Everything regulation, everything normal, except for the small device hidden in a sealed pocket against her chest, wrapped in sterile packaging. The final evaluation was designed to test everything they had learned over 4 years. Squads of 5 cadets would be deployed into a massive combat simulation environment, covering 30 square miles. They would face automated drones, environmental hazards, equipment failures, and time pressure. The exercise would last 72 hours with minimal rest. Success meant graduation and placement in frontline units. Failure meant support roles or washing out entirely. Katie's squad consisted of herself, 2 frost warriors named Kel and Marin, an insect-like Trell named Zix, and another human named Greg Patterson. Greg was a decent soldier, quiet and competent, though he struggled with the same ammunition issues as Katie. The frost warriors were powerhouses, strong and tireless. Zix moved with unsettling speed and could climb any surface. Instructor Vex addressed all the squads before deployment. You will operate with minimal supervision. Command will monitor your progress but will not intervene except in case of actual life-threatening injury. Equipment failures are part of the scenario. Expect your gear to malfunction at the worst possible times. Adapt or fail. Deploy in 5 minutes. The squads boarded transport vehicles that took them to different starting positions in the simulation zone. Katie's squad was dropped at the edge of a ruined industrial complex. The buildings were real, repurposed from an abandoned mining operation. The enemies and hazards were simulated but dangerous. The scenario's weapons used shock rounds that hurt like hell but wouldn't cause permanent injury. Getting hit meant pain and temporary paralysis. Kel took squad leader position naturally. The Frost Warrior had the most combat experience. We need to secure a defensive position and orient ourselves. Maron, take point. Zix, scout ahead. Humans, watch our flanks. They moved through the ruins carefully. The simulation began gently, letting them find their rhythm. Small groups of drones appeared, providing target practice. Katie fired in careful bursts, making each shot count. Greg did the same beside her. The Frost Warriors were less conservative, laying down impressive fire that shredded enemies. 4 hours in, they encountered their first serious engagement. A force of 30 drones ambushed them in a narrow street between 2 buildings. The drones used coordinated tactics, flanking and suppressing. Kel called for them to fall back to a building they could defend. The firefight was intense. Drones poured into the street, their return fire forcing the squad to keep their heads down. Katie's rifle grew hot from sustained fire. She was on her second power cell when Zix's weapon failed, its power supply shorting out in a shower of sparks. The Trell switched to backup weapons without missing a beat. Equipment failure starting, Marin called out. Watch your gear. Katie made her third power cell last as long as possible. They cleared the drones eventually, but it cost them ammunition and time. Greg was down to his last cell. Katie had 1 remaining plus her backup pistol cells. The Frost Warriors still had plenty, but they were carrying twice the load. 12 hours into the exercise, Katie's rifle jammed. She cleared it, but it jammed again 20 minutes later. The weapon was failing as designed. She could continue using it, but it would be unreliable. Greg's rifle failed completely around the same time, refusing to power up at all. 2 weapons down, Kel noted. Humans, you're on backup weapons. Stay behind us. Katie switched to her pistol, hating the feeling of being relegated to backup while her alien squad mates did the real fighting. This was exactly what she had been trying to prevent. Humans as support. Always 1 step behind because of biology and equipment limitations, they pushed deeper into the simulation zone. The scenarios grew harder. Environmental hazards appeared. Areas flooded with water that the Frost Warriors could wade through, but that would short out most equipment. Toxic gas zones that required sealed suits. Extreme temperature areas that sapped energy and endurance. 20 hours in, exhaustion was setting in. They had slept in shifts, 2 hours each, barely enough to function. Katie's back ached from her pack. Her feet hurt. Her hands were cramped from gripping weapons. But the evaluation continued relentlessly. At the 24-hour mark, they received an objective update on their command tablets. A coalition outpost was under attack 3 miles away. They needed to relieve the defenders and hold the position for 6 hours. Time limit: they had to arrive within 90 minutes or the outpost would fall. Kel pushed them hard. They ran when they could, jogged when they couldn't run. The Frost Warriors barely seemed tired. Zix scuttled along with mechanical efficiency. Katie and Greg struggled to keep pace, their lungs burning. They arrived at the outpost with 20 minutes to spare. The outpost was a fortified compound on a hillside, already under assault by waves of drones. Simulated defenders were falling back under pressure. Kel led them in through a side entrance and they reinforced the collapsing line. The battle was chaos. Drones attacked from 3 directions in overwhelming numbers. The defenders, played by Academy AI systems, fought with desperation, but were clearly losing. Katie's pistol barked steadily, each shot carefully placed. But pistol rounds did less damage than rifle fire. She felt inadequate, a weak link while everyone else carried their weight. 30 minutes into the defense, Greg's pistol died. Empty, no more power cells. He was down to just his knife. He looked at Katie with frustration and fear. They both knew what this meant. Humans couldn't sustain prolonged combat. They would fail this evaluation because of ammunition, just like they had failed so many exercises before. Kel saw Greg's situation and pulled him back. "You're on medical duty. Treat wounded, manage supplies. Let the others fight." It was a smart call, but it stung. Humans reduced to support roles because they couldn't keep their weapons running. Katie checked her pistol. Half a power cell remaining. Maybe 10 minutes of combat at her current rate of fire. Then she would join Greg in the rear, useless. The drones intensified their assault. A coordinated push that overwhelmed the western wall. Defenders fell back and the line began to collapse. Marin moved to reinforce but took multiple hits and went down, paralyzed by shock rounds. Zix tried to hold the gap alone but was driven back by sheer numbers. Kel made a hard decision. Fall back to the inner compound. We can't hold the outer wall. They retreated in a fighting withdrawal. Katie's pistol died as they fell back. The power cell was empty. She was out of ammunition with 5 hours and 30 minutes remaining in the objective. Greg looked at her, and she saw her own frustration reflected in his eyes. They had trained for 4 years, learned everything the Academy could teach them, and it didn't matter. Biology was destiny. The inner compound was smaller, easier to defend, but they had lost half their defensive positions. The drones would overrun them eventually. Kel was calculating odds, trying to figure out how to hold with reduced forces. Zix was wounded, one leg damaged by a lucky shot. Maran was recovering from paralysis but still weak. The other defenders were in similar shape. Katie made a decision. She couldn't watch this fail. She couldn't accept support roles and limitations. Not after 4 years of work. Not after everything she and Danny had built. She moved to a corner of the compound where cameras wouldn't see clearly. The simulation recorded everything, but if she was careful, she might hide what she was about to do long enough for it not to matter. She pulled out the device, still in its sterile wrapping. Her hands shook as she unwrapped it. Danny was monitoring from the command center. They had arranged for him to have access to her biometric feeds under the guise of a medical research project. If something went wrong, he would see it and could call for help. But once she used the device, there would be no hiding it. The choice was pass the evaluation or avoid punishment. She couldn't have both. Katie rolled up her left sleeve, found the vein in her forearm. She had practiced this insertion dozens of times over the past months. Her hands were steady despite her racing heart. The needle slid in smoothly and she activated the device. The familiar cold sensation spread through her arm, followed by the cramping pain. She bit back a gasp and secured the device with tape. Then she grabbed her dead rifle, ejected the empty power cell, and plugged the device's output cable into the cell port. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then her rifle's power indicator flickered and came to life, not the full green of a fresh cell. A steady yellow indicating partial power, but it was power, flowing from her body into the weapon. The pain was worse than in testing, much worse. The stress of exhaustion, dehydration, and combat made everything more intense. Katie's arm felt like it was being crushed and frozen simultaneously. She forced herself to breathe through it, to function despite it. She returned to the wall, rifle in hand. Kel saw her weapon active and looked confused. "Morgan, I thought you were out of ammunition." "Found a partial cell," Katie lied. "It's not much, but it'll help." Katie woke up in the medical wing with a splitting headache and an IV in her right arm. The left arm, where the device had been connected, was wrapped in bandages. Sunlight streamed through the window, suggesting she had been unconscious for at least a night. Her mouth was dry and her whole body ached like she had been beaten. Danny sat in a chair beside her bed, looking exhausted. When he saw her eyes open, relief flooded his face. "Thank God you've been out for 18 hours. Do you have any idea how close you came to putting yourself into a coma?" "Did we pass?" Katie asked, her voice rough. "Are you serious?" "Katie, you nearly died. Your blood sugar crashed to 30 milligrams per deciliter. That's seizure territory. Your body temperature dropped to 95 degrees. You pushed yourself into metabolic shock. But did we pass the evaluation? Danny sighed. I don't know. Right now, passing is the least of your problems. You're under arrest. Academy security took the device as evidence. There's going to be a disciplinary hearing, probably a court-martial. Katie tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. The room spun. Danny helped her lie back down. How bad is it? She asked. Bad. You violated at least 30 different regulations. Unauthorized augmentation. Unapproved medical experimentation. Reckless endangerment of yourself. The disciplinary board is not happy. And you? Are you in trouble? They're investigating my involvement. I might lose my medical certification. Definitely won't be graduating on schedule. Danny rubbed his eyes. But honestly, I'm more worried about you. What you did was incredible and insane in equal measure. You powered a plasma rifle from your own body for over 90 minutes total. That shouldn't be possible, but it is possible. I proved it. You proved you could do it once and nearly kill yourself. That's not a viable combat solution. Before Katie could respond, the door opened. Instructor Vex entered, ducking slightly to fit through the human-sized doorway. He looked at Danny. Out. I need to speak with Cadet Morgan alone. Danny hesitated, protective. Katie nodded to him. It's okay, go. After Danny left, Vex pulled a chair over and sat. The chair protested under his weight. He studied Katie for a long moment before speaking. Do you understand the severity of what you've done? Yes, sir. I don't think you do. You created an experimental device without authorization. You tested it on yourself without medical oversight. You used it in a combat evaluation, putting not just yourself but your entire squad at risk. If that device had malfunctioned, if it had stopped your heart or caused a seizure, your squad would have been down a member in a critical situation. Katie met his eyes. But it didn't malfunction, it worked. I kept fighting when I should have been useless. I helped save that objective. At what cost? You're in a medical bed with metabolic damage that might take weeks to heal. You risked permanent injury for a single evaluation. I risked it to prove a point. Humans can compete. We're not limited to support roles. We can sustain frontline combat if we're willing to adapt. Vex was quiet for a moment. Then he said something Katie didn't expect. I know, sir. I know humans can adapt. I've known since your species joined the coalition. Do you think I've been harsh on human cadets because I believe you're inferior? No, I've been harsh because you needed to be pushed to find your strengths. Katie tried to process this. I don't understand. Vex leaned back in his chair. Every species in the coalition has biological advantages. The Frost have strength, the Ciel have energy manipulation, the Trail have speed and agility. But you know what humans have? You have the best pattern recognition in the galaxy. You have creativity that other species can't match. You adapt to new situations faster than anyone else. And most importantly, you have this, he gestured at her bandaged arm, this willingness to push boundaries that make other species uncomfortable. Then why did you tell me I couldn't sustain combat operations? Why did you say biology was destiny? Because I wanted to see how you would respond. Would you accept limitations or would you find a way around them? You found a way. An insane, dangerous, unauthorized way, but a way nonetheless. Katie felt anger building. So this was all a test? You let me struggle for 4 years just to see if I would break the rules? No, I let you struggle because that's what training is. Struggle builds strength. And yes, I hoped you would find creative solutions. I didn't expect this. He gestured at her arm again. This is beyond what I imagined. You literally made yourself into a power source. That's either brilliant or suicidal. Possibly both. So what happens now? Do I get expelled? There will be a court-martial. The disciplinary board is required to address unauthorized augmentation, but... Vex paused. There are people in Coalition High Command who are very interested in what you've created. Humans have been struggling to find their role in the military. You might have just found it. Over the next 3 days, Katie recovered enough to leave medical. She was confined to quarters while the investigation proceeded. Danny was allowed to visit, also confined pending the hearing. They sat in Katie's room, neither quite knowing what to say. I'm sorry I got you into this, Katie finally said. I made my own choices, Danny replied. I could have refused to help. I could have reported you. I didn't. Why didn't you? Danny smiled slightly. Because I believed in what we were doing. Humans deserve better than support roles. We deserve to be equals in the coalition, not junior partners. What you built, Katie, it's going to change things. Even if we both get expelled, someone else will pick up this work. The court-martial was scheduled for the following week. Katie was assigned a defense advocate, a stern human lawyer named Kate Murphy who had experience with military law. Kate reviewed the case with brutal honesty. "You violated 37 specific regulations," Kate said, reading from her tablet. "The evidence against you is overwhelming. You built an unauthorized device. You tested it without medical approval. You used it in an official evaluation. They have the device, medical records showing your metabolic crash, testimony from your squad, and monitoring data from the evaluation. There's no defense against the facts, so I'm expelled. Almost certainly." But Kate looked up from her tablet. "There are some interesting complications. Your squad passed their evaluation with high marks. Kell specifically cited your actions as crucial to success. Coalition Research and Development has requested access to your device designs, and someone very high up in command has been asking questions about you." The court-martial hearing was held in the Academy's tribunal chamber, a formal space designed to accommodate multiple species. Katie wore her cadet uniform, cleaned and pressed. Danny sat in the observers section looking nervous. Kate sat beside Katie at the defense table. The tribunal board consisted of 5 senior officers from different species. A Frost admiral served as chair. Also present were a Scial general, a human colonel named Steve Harris, a Trell commander, and a Soran general who looked almost as intimidating as Instructor Vex. The prosecution laid out the case methodically. They presented the device as evidence, had medical experts testify about the risks Katie took, and showed footage from the evaluation that clearly displayed her using unauthorized equipment. It was damning and thorough. When it was time for the defense, Kate stood. "We do not dispute the facts as presented. Cadet Morgan did violate regulations. She did use unauthorized equipment. She did risk her own health. But context matters. I'd like to call Instructor Vex to testify." Vex took the stand, his large frame making the witness chair look small. The prosecution objected to his testimony as irrelevant, but the tribunal allowed it. Kate asked, "Instructor Vex, in your 30 years of training coalition soldiers, have you observed differences in how various species approach problem solving?" "Yes," Vex said. "Each species has characteristic patterns. Frost tend toward direct solutions using their strength. Sciel prefer elegant energy-based approaches. Trell use speed and precision. And humans adapt. They find unconventional solutions. They use tools and technology in ways other species don't consider. They take risks others avoid." "In your professional opinion, was Cadet Morgan's action characteristic of human problem solving?" "Yes, she identified a limitation, researched a solution, and implemented it despite risks. Very human." "One more question. Did Cadet Morgan's actions during the evaluation demonstrate the kind of innovative thinking that makes for effective soldiers?" Vex looked directly at Katie. "Yes, she turned a biological weakness into an advantage. That's exactly what the Coalition needs in its soldiers." The prosecution cross-examined, trying to get Vex to admit Katie's actions were reckless and endangered others. Vex stood firm. "All combat is risk." She managed her risk and succeeded. That's the definition of good soldiering. Next, Kate called Kell to testify. The Frost warrior described the evaluation from his perspective. "We were losing. Our ammunition was depleted, our position was failing. Then Morgan returned to the fight with an active weapon. She held the line for 40 minutes. Without her, we would have failed the objective. Were you concerned that her equipment was unauthorized?" Kate asked. "During combat, I was concerned with survival and mission success. Morgan's weapon worked. That's what mattered." Greg testified next, describing the same events from his perspective. 6 months passed in a blur of work. Katie graduated from the academy with her class, receiving her commission as a lieutenant in the Coalition military. The ceremony was bittersweet. She wore her uniform with pride, but the probationary status hung over her like a shadow. One mistake and everything she had worked for would vanish. The real work began immediately after graduation. Coalition Research and Development assigned her to a special project division focused on human combat systems. The team consisted of engineers, doctors, and strategists from multiple species, all working to turn Katie's crude prototype into something that could be safely deployed across human forces. Danny joined the project as the lead medical officer. His probationary status meant he couldn't practice general medicine yet, but his expertise with the bio-interface system made him invaluable. Together, they worked 12-hour days refining the technology. The new version of the device was sleeker and more sophisticated. Instead of a single unit that pierced a vein, it consisted of 3 parts: a small implant that sat just under the skin, installed through minor surgery, an external regulator unit that clipped to combat gear, and a standard power cell adapter that could interface with any coalition weapon. The implant monitored the user's metabolism constantly, preventing dangerous power drain. The regulator managed energy conversion. The adapter made it compatible with existing equipment. Testing was extensive and careful. Volunteer soldiers went through medical screening, received the implants, and trained with the system under controlled conditions. The results were promising. Human soldiers could sustain combat operations for 60 to 90 minutes on biopower alone, far longer than their previous power cell loadouts allowed. The strain was significant but manageable with proper nutrition and rest. Katie trained with the new system herself, relearning combat techniques with the refined technology. It still hurt. That was unavoidable. Drawing power from the body would always involve discomfort. But the pain was tolerable, and the medical safeguards prevented the kind of dangerous crash she had experienced during final evaluations. The Coalition's interest in the project went beyond just solving an ammunition problem. High Command was beginning to recognize that humans brought unique advantages to the military. Other species had settled into established roles based on their biology. Humans, being new and adaptable, could fill gaps others couldn't. The biointerface system was just the beginning. 4 months after graduation, Katie was promoted to lead a new experimental unit called the Vanguard Corps. It would be the first human unit fully equipped with biointerface systems, designed to test combat effectiveness in real situations. Katie had the authority to recruit volunteers from across human military forces. She put out a call for volunteers and was overwhelmed by the response. Hundreds of human soldiers applied, all eager to prove that humanity deserved its place in the Coalition. Katie selected 30 of the best, a mix of infantry, engineers, and tactical specialists. They gathered at a Coalition training facility on the moon Titan III to begin intensive preparation. Instructor Vex requested transfer to help train the unit. Katie was surprised but pleased. Having the Soran warrior's expertise and reputation would give the Vanguard Corps credibility. Vex's presence also sent a message to the rest of the Coalition. This project was serious. Training was brutal. The volunteers had to learn not just to fight with biointerface systems, but to push their bodies to sustainable limits. They practiced combat while monitoring their glucose levels, learned to recognize the signs of metabolic stress, and developed tactics that played to human strengths rather than trying to match alien capabilities. Danny established medical protocols for the unit. Each soldier had a monitoring implant that transmitted biometric data in real time. If anyone's vital signs approached dangerous levels, automated systems would lock out their biointerface and alert medical staff. It wasn't perfect, but it was safer than Katie's original reckless approach. The Vanguard Corps trained for 2 months before being declared combat ready. Their first assignment came sooner than expected. A Coalition border outpost on the planet Threshold 9 came under attack by the Krell Dominion, a hostile faction that had been probing Coalition defenses for months. The Krell were an insectoid species with advanced technology and a serious advantage. They had been studying Coalition tactics and biology for years, looking for weaknesses to exploit. The attack on Threshold 9 was devastating. The Krell deployed a new weapon system, electromagnetic pulses designed to drain power cells instantly. Within minutes of the assault, Coalition defenders found their weapons dead. Traditional combat became impossible. The outpost sent a desperate call for help. Coalition Command deployed multiple relief forces, including the Vanguard Corps. Katie received the mission briefing while her unit was loading onto transport ships. The situation was dire. Over 200 Coalition soldiers trapped in the outpost, surrounded by Krell forces, unable to fight effectively because their weapons wouldn't hold a charge. "This is what we trained for," Katie told her soldiers as they prepared for deployment. "The Krell studied Coalition forces and found our weakness. They know how to disable our weapons, but they studied the wrong humans. We don't need external power cells. We are the power source. Show them what humans can do." The transport ships made the jump to Threshold 9 at maximum speed. The journey took 6 hours, during which Katie reviewed tactical data with her squad leaders. The Krell had surrounded the outpost and were slowly tightening the noose. Conventional coalition reinforcements had been repelled by the power-draining weapons. The Vanguard Corps would be going in essentially alone. They dropped from orbit in combat pods, coming down fast on the outpost's southern perimeter. The landing was rough, pods slamming into the ground with enough force to rattle teeth. Katie was out of her pod in seconds, rifle in hand, biointerface activated. The familiar cold sensation spread through her arm, followed by the cramping pain. She had learned to work through it, to let it fade into the background of her awareness. Her rifle powered up, the indicator glowing its characteristic yellow. Around her, 30 other humans activated their systems. 30 rifles came to life, ready for sustained combat. The Krell noticed the new arrivals immediately. A force of at least 50 Krell soldiers moved to intercept, their weapons charged and ready. They were confident. They had been winning this battle all day. Katie's unit opened fire. Plasma bolts lit up the twilight, hammering into Krell positions. The enemy returned fire, but the Vanguard Corps had one advantage the other coalition forces lacked. They could keep shooting. The Krell's power-draining weapons swept over them, the electromagnetic pulses hitting with visible distortion. Katie felt her rifle stutter for a moment as the pulse hit. Then it stabilized, drawing power from her body instead of a dead external cell. The Krell's confidence visibly faltered. These humans should have been disarmed like all the others. Instead, they were fighting harder, pushing forward with sustained fire. Katie led her unit in a wedge formation, breaking through the Krell encirclement. They fought for 20 minutes straight, never pausing to reload or change power cells. Just continuous, relentless fire. They reached the outpost's outer wall and established a breach point. Coalition defenders inside saw the human unit still fighting and rallied. Someone opened the gate, and the Vanguard Corps pushed through into the compound. The scene inside was chaos. Hundreds of coalition soldiers from a dozen species sat with useless weapons, unable to fight back against the Krell bombardment. The defenders had been reduced to throwing rocks and fighting hand-to-hand when the enemy breached the walls. Morale was shattered. Katie found the ranking officer, a Frost colonel named Brent Shaw. He looked at her unit with confusion and desperate hope. "How are your weapons still functioning?" "New human technology, sir. Biopowered. The Krell's draining weapons don't affect us. We can fight." Colonel Shaw's expression hardened with determination. "Then fight. Buy us time. Reinforcements are en route, but they're 4 hours out. Can you hold that long?" Katie looked at her soldiers. They were already feeling the strain of extended combat. 4 hours would push them to their absolute limits, but they had trained for this. They were ready. "We'll hold, sir." The Vanguard Corps took positions along the outpost's walls, spreading out to cover the most vulnerable points. The Krell launched another assault within minutes, clearly eager to finish the battle before more coalition forces arrived. This time, they met organized resistance. The battle became a grinding test of endurance. The Krell attacked in waves, trying to overwhelm the defenders through sheer numbers. Katie's unit held the line, their rifles never falling silent. They worked in shifts, with half the unit firing while the other half ate high-energy rations and drank glucose solutions to replenish their metabolisms. Danny was there too, having insisted on deploying with the unit as their medical officer. He monitored everyone's biometrics from a mobile command post, calling out warnings when anyone approached dangerous metabolic levels. Twice he had to forcibly shut down a soldier's biointerface when they pushed too hard, but the system worked. Humans were fighting on the front lines, sustaining combat that would have been